Good morning. I'm here to greet the vinyl community and read a chapter out called Location, 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 the Metaphysical Real Estate of Music and Murder. Charlie remained steadfast in his belief that even though he wasn't directly trafficking in Tex Watson's rampage at Cielo Drive, that calamity was nonetheless the result of some metaphysical property of his music. His songs, after all, were the binding factor that drew all of those ill-fated individuals into his orbit, from the hopeful spring of '68 to the horrid summer of '69. According to Charlie, I planted my flag in the house that Tex went crazy when I played out my soul for Terry sitting on the summer living room floor 1 year before Tex piled the bodies up right there. My flag is my music. The vibrations of those songs were powerful, man. Realer than real. They echo forever. My music opened up an indivisible doorway to that place. Tex walks through it. Several of Melcher's famous friends recall an encounter Charlie displayed his guitar at Cielo Drive. Social events, our most detailed accounting being from Dean Martin's daughter, Deanna, one of Melcher's many girlfriends during the year. That producer was Charlie's number one fan. Charlie also speculated that the Cielo Drive property was already accursed and inhabited by supernatural forces long before the music reverberated into its walls. Terry used to be nervous in that pad, recalled Charlie. He needed to take those fucking heavy-duty knockout pills to sleep there late at night. I tried to calm him down to get him off that shit. He was weak. Dude told me something crept into his dreams in that place. That's one reason he moved out of his mom's place to the beach. This apprehension of Melcher was confirmed by Mark Lindsay, singer of Paul Revere and the Raiders, who cohabited Cielo Drive with his band's producer, Melcher. As Lindsay remembered on his Facebook page, this master bedroom just felt wrong to me somehow. Although it was much larger than my room, it always seemed cold and a little creepy. I know Terry had a hard time feeling comfortable in his room and took sleeping pills nightly. The other area of the house that felt weird was the entry hall. It also seemed several degrees colder than the main part of the house, even in the summer's heat, and no one ever lingered there. A month or so after moving in, I heard that there was perhaps a reason for my odd feelings. Rudy Altobelli owned the property and lived in the guest house that was slightly down the hill. He dropped by one afternoon to visit Terry and me. After we'd had a glass or two of wine, Rudy asked if we were superstitious, and we both responded no. And then he proceeded to tell us the story of the house. It seemed that several Hollywood luminaries had lived there over the years, but the story of some of the early residents really got our attention. Rudy said that one of the first couples to occupy the house had been newlyweds. On their wedding night, the bride somehow learned that the groom had cheated on her in the recent past. Supposedly, after the marriage was consummated and he was asleep, the new lady of the house took a large knife from the kitchen and stabbed him to death in the bed. Then he put a bullet in her brain and used the small lady's pistol that he had given her for protection as one of her wedding gifts. Rudy told us the whole affair had been hushed up and was never talked about because it would reflect negativity on the real estate value. He said although the femme fatale spirit still lingered, she probably wouldn't bother two guys, although he warned that she didn't seem to tolerate beautiful women very well. The ghost didn't tolerate beautiful women. As long as you don't let your girlfriend stay over too long, you should be okay, he warned. And when he went back to his residence, leaving us to ponder. Over the next few months, I began to believe that Rudy was telling the truth and that the bride was not only still with us, but quite angry because strange things began to happen. Except for the odd feelings in Terry's bedroom and the unexplained temperature drop in the front entry, the house seems fairly neutral most of the time. However, unless we were sitting at the piano or listening to music, which we played at ear-splitting levels, Terry and I felt more comfortable hanging out in the rose garden, which was on the opposite side of the house from the master bedroom. More and more often, I noticed that Terry was taking downers, Valiums, and Tuinals during the day and not just to sleep. The 44 Magnum I usually kept in a suitcase in my closet, I now slept with under my pillow. I couldn't put fingers on it, but the back of my mind, I felt like I needed protection. This is Lindsay Buckingham talking. When I moved into my house, I brought my studio round system, including Macintosh amps and a JBL monitor speakers, which I installed in the loft. I also brought my telescope mounted on a tripod, which we replaced in the front entryway. The idea was that we opened on of the front Dutch doors, and then we could use the telescope to check out the view of Beverly Hills and the Pacific Ocean in the distance. I think we did this once, and then with the scope just became a fix in the entrance. One day after a month after I moved in, Terry and I were both seated at the piano bench working on a tune. We were kicking some lyrics around when all of a sudden there was a loud crash from the vicinity of the front door. We both jumped up and found that the telescope had been knocked over. The tripod was still opened and locked in place, and no one else was in the house and had no pets at the time, and the door was shut tight. We talked about it and agreed there was no way it could have fallen over by itself, but somehow it had. A few weeks later, when I was sound asleep, the stereo system came on at full volume in the middle of the night. Does that sound creepy? I jumped out of bed and ran into the living room to tell Terry, turn it down, but no one was there in the room. I shut it off and went to bed. Does it sound like gaslighting, maybe MK? The next morning, Terry was upset. It seemed that he had picked up one of the go-go girls at the whiskey, kind of like in San Francisco with Susan Atkins, and was at a critical point in the relationship when the stereo suddenly started blasting at full volume. I told him I thought he had to turn it on, but he vehemently denied it, so we left with another mystery. The stereo in the night happened at least 2 other times that I remember, and since I was on tour about half the time, I might have missed more of the unwelcome events. After moving to Hollywood during the Second World War, French actress Michelle Morgan commissioned architect Robert Byrd to design and build her the French country home that became 150 Cielo Drive. Many years later, Morgan told actor George Chakiris that she eventually became frightened to live in the domicile she constructed because the place was filled with sinister noises. Nor was Cielo Drive the only reputable haunted locale in the saga. Jay Sebring's nearby manor on Easton Drive, where Tex Watson tried but failed to take Sebring and Tate as hostages when there weren't enough drugs to steal at Cielo, was also the home of things that go bump in the night. As we see Cielo's homicidal bride, this supernatural activity was also said to be the result of murder in its walls long before Sebring took residence. We took full responsibility for this accessory role in the crime. Charlie always stated numerous times that he believed the same force that doomed him to life in prison led innocent bystander Sharon Tate to lose her life as collateral damage in the Watson Island breakdown. She wasn't there that night. I wouldn't be here, period, he reflected. Charlie frequently voiced his metaphysical contemplation on how the role his acquaintance Tate, who he dubbed Queen of the Vampires, played in her husband's film, Dance of the Vampires, helped to postulate what happened. He ruminated that bad vibes had conjured by the Rosemary's Baby only 1 hour before the murder opened circles of the spiritual in that house. Man, you can't light a fire and not expect something to get burned. Reading in the 2001 edition of the Manson File, the Tate's Hollywood career began from the small coastal town of San Pedro he'd been released from in '67. Charlie stated to me that they were both under the spell of St. Peter, the first pope. He tried the synchronistic into the long life obsession with the Catholic Church and the papacy in keeping with the anti-papist Church of the Nazarene doctrines which he was raised, wish he saw those religious institutions as a malevolent perversion of Christ's teachings. He remarked on the curious fact that Tate, Sebring, Fikowski, Folger, the LaBiancas, and Shorty Shea were all Roman Catholics. From the ceaseless symbol interpreting perspective of his me mysticism, Charlie said that whatever destiny of the Holy Ghost brought him and Tate to the town named after the first pope was connected to the brotherhood of monks running the Roman Catholics boys' reformatory the Protestant juvenile delinquent was mistakenly confined to in his youth. Some of you will still entertain the fanciful notions planted from the lies you've been fed, maintaining that the crimes examined in this chapter were conceived by an ill, hypnotic hippie cult leader to A, bring out a race war that inspired by Beatles lyrics, B, strike back at Terry Melcher for denying him a record contract, or C, if any of the number of sanctifies thirsty occult cabals, or E, manipulate his followers to get his own hands dirty so they wouldn't snitch on the shooting of Crow and slicing up Hinman. But Manson himself, I repeat, consistently insisted that the August 9th massacre of Sharon Tate's home was something that happened to him, but something he made happen. He did not deny foreknowledge that Watson and Kasabian intended to wreak some sort of revenge on Wojciech Wachowski, though he assumed a retaliatory robbery of all that he had in mind. He was unabashed and acknowledged that he played a major role in the accessory in erasing and manipulating crime scene evidence that after the fact that would lead him back to the commune. But throughout the decades of his imprisonment, Charlie never failed to stress what happened on Cielo Drive was more than a mundane meth murder spree. It appeared to be a strictly mundane view. Far from seeing himself as an instigator of the event, Charlie consistently characterized the Benedict Canyon bloodletting as a cosmic come-together of the karmic energies fated to collide. Despite all that he knew that he never said, he insisted that some of the aspects of the murder were much as the riddle to him as they remain to all of us, still seeking answers to their mystery half a century later. For the man blamed for the bloodshed, the inexplicable ringing of that phenomenon bell in Brian Wilson's studio symbolized this enigma, and so I leave some synonymous reverberations in the echo of this chapter, a sonic encapsulation of the tragedy enduring essence. It reminds me of the Buddhist meeting that I went to with Gary Hinman, and they rang the gong. We don't know what. It's like when they shot a missile at the moon and they thought it wasn't going to unring because the moon's metallic, allegedly. There's another chapter here called Follow the Money, which has to do with all the drug crimes and all the drug burns. And then after that, we go into a guy named, what is his name? He is a really important character in this story. But I guess that's another couple chapters away. So we're just going to leave it now and end this stream. Say goodbye to all the people in the crime family and the vinyl community. I've been trying to do this stream for 3 days. Luckily, I got my, a short? I made a short that got 150 views, so I was able to do this live podcast. I hope you appreciate it and you keep liking and sharing so I can continue to bring you the truth.